Hello and welcome to the big kickoff with Betfred, where you get all the best tips and predictions all coming from the Racing Post. We're going to be talking the Championship now in the company of Mark Langdon, Ali Maxwell from Not the Top 20 podcast. Ali, great to see you. Kevin Campbell, always good to see you
Always
as well.
nice to see you.
Mark, start with you. Touch on last season first. Leeds finally passed the post and the job that Marcelo Bielsa did.
They were fantastic. I mean, on a lot of the data, they should have gone up the year before, but you know, another year down there, that doesn't seem to have harmed them too much. The best team went up. You can't have any complaints when the best team wins the league. The scrap for second was I mean, it's pretty hilarious at times, really. You know, West Brom and Brentford both feeling the pressure of what it would mean, you know, to secure promotion. I was surprised they got the season finished. I mean, I was speaking to somebody in like April time, and he just no chance of doing the Championship. So credit to them for, you know, for getting on. The relegation battle was brilliant as well. Just as a neutral watching it.
Not
sad.
a Charlton fan.
Not for Charlton. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. But also, you know, sad story with Wigan as well. But it was drama. It's just the Championship. What a league it is. You know, it's the best league around, isn't it?
Ali, we know you're all over the EFL, so I'll let you say your thoughts on Marcelo Bielsa and the job, but also West Brom, the job that Slaven Bilic did, first time ever in the Championship, but they limped over the line, didn't they?
They did a bit, but I think where Bielsa gets credit for just a masterclass in coaching, in improving the players that were there and in transforming that club, which really needed transforming. I suppose Bilic is probably getting more credit for a man management job more than anything else, for having a squad that on paper was very strong, a team that had gone close last season without always impressing that much, and just corralling them into a good winning football team, which they hadn't been the season before to the same extent. So I think he brought just this aura of class and experience, and the players bought into it, and that's really what for me stood out, as well as just getting those individual players like Diangana and Pereira to provide the difference.
Yeah, they were great to watch at times. Amazing to think, though, that Brentford just needed 2 points in the final 2 games of the regular season, and then they had another go in the playoff final.
Yeah, look, this is the Championship for you. The problem Brentford had was they've never been there. They've never been so close, and when the spotlight isn't on you, you could see how well they were doing. Watkins and Barama and all these guys were performing week in, week out, and then when the spotlight was on them, I think it was West Brom lost to Huddersfield, and then it was the Stoke game. You think, right, Brentford, let's see what you got. They failed then, and then the last day of the season, they had the opportunity to do what they needed to do, couldn't get over the line, and then they had an opportunity, obviously, in the playoff, and couldn't get it done. So maybe that's their level. You know, maybe that is their level. Watkins ain't going to be there. Barama probably ain't going to be there next season. So they're going to be weaker. Bringing in Tony, who's a decent player, but I don't think it's going to be the same Brentford that we've seen last season.
What do you think, Ali? I mean, it was an amazing job that Thomas Frank did, and they were almost everybody's second favourite side, weren't they, in the Championship? So many were willing them to go on. What do you put it down to, a mentality thing, or...?
Yeah, quite possibly. Kevin can give more insight on player mentality and not having been in those positions before and how that can affect players. Clearly, they went on that incredible run, which gave them a chance anyway. One of their problems was they didn't start the season very well. Said Benrahma had maybe had his head turned a bit last summer. They persuaded him and Watkins to stay, and they almost succeeded in what they were trying to do. I think they're one of many interesting teams, but specifically, kind of to what you said, actually, Brentford, they've changed their position in the food chain in English football, but especially in the Championship. I think, as you said, everyone's favourite second club, right? And even fans of teams in the Championship, they always, I quite rate Brentford, they play nice stuff, but we don't really think they're a threat, right? Because that's what they thought, because they'd previously been a League Two, League One team for most of their modern history. But in the way that they've bought and sold players and made so much money through that, they can now spend more money on transfer fees than most of the clubs in the Championship that aren't in receipt of parachute payments. And I think that's bumped them up the food chain a bit. That winning run and collapse at the end of the last season put them massively on the radar of everyone. And I think the way that some people perceive Thomas Frank to talk after the game with great confidence, maybe bordering on arrogance sometimes in the eyes of some, it means that they are there to be shot at now. And that's a really interesting aspect of going into this season. Top of the market in the betting, there to be shot at. How will they cope?
I love Thomas Frank. I don't see him as arrogant. I see him as honest. And it's almost like you want your managers to be, or even just people, to be talking on air in the way they are. Straight. You know, I remember when he said when Leeds were under pressure at the time, well, they're coming to a ground where, you know, we can blitz teams, and they showed that they were. Actually, I feel that was a massive game for Leeds in their turn of the season. But let's talk about Forest as well. How do they fall out the playoff places when they're in there since December?
I mean, I don't know how you... I mean, first of all, in terms of like a lot of these expected goal data, which I do like to follow, I don't... I'm not married to it and sort of base all of my opinions on it, but they were seen to be overachieving a bit anyway, and so maybe there was a bit of natural regression, but to collapse the way that they did on the last day is a concern for this season. I think they've signed well, and the best way I think to respond to a real big disappointment is to freshen things up and to add what you didn't have. And Lowell Taylor gives them a definite goal threat, an added goal threat, because you know, they're very reliant, weren't they, last season on Graben, and that was about it. I think Luke Freeman has proven in the EFL before. Maybe it didn't work out for him at Sheffield United. I was a bit surprised it didn't actually, but I definitely think he can be a creative force in the Championship. So maybe Forest will be better this year and a better watch, because it hard going at times last season. They're probably going to lose Matty Cash, but if you can lose somebody, a right back for big money, is probably not a bad place to do it, and you can then reinvest that dough elsewhere. So I expect them to be up there.
They were one of a few teams, weren't they, where there was quite a lot to like, and they were well set up under Lamucci. They were comfortable out of possession, and they broke quite well. But their big problem was they couldn't put teams away at home when they were meant to win. They were good against the top teams. They always seemed to perform against Leeds and Fulham, and in big games, in Brentford as well. They had a good record there. But when they were at home to the Charltons and teams down towards the bottom, they needed to take the ascendancy, and they couldn't do that in many games.
And just one final one on last season, because Marcus touched on it, but it was amazing what happened at the bottom. I mean, how did Luton survive, but especially Barnsley? When you think about Barnsley, they had to beat Nottingham Forest, and then they had to beat Brentford away in the last game.
Look, but this is the Championship for you. Everybody on any given day can beat, you know, from top to bottom, they can beat each other. I think the Barnsley result sums up what the Championship is all about. 1 minute you're down and out, you think nothing's going to happen, then all of a sudden you get a break, there's a chance, and then a young lad comes up and scores a winner away at Brentford
in the last minute.
In the last minute of the season to keep you up. Amazing. Obviously, Wigan fell away and stuff like that, but the Championship is such a difficult league to stay in. It's going to be a hell of a season.
Yeah, it used to be in the Premier League that anyone can beat anyone, but Championship, that's where anyone can beat anyone. Let's talk about this season then. How do you feel that the relegated sides, first and foremost, will do?
I think they're really difficult to judge at the moment. As we speak, I look at that Watford team and you think, wow, they've got Sarr, they've got Pereira, Deulofeu, Capu, Decore. I mean, that is... And then you've got Deeney. I mean, Luis Suarez scored a lot... Not that Luis Suarez, a different one. Scored a lot of goals in the Segunda.
He's on the market, that Luis
Suarez. Yeah, maybe. It might be a little bit out of the Pozzo's reach. But yeah, he scored a lot of goals in the Segunda last year. João Pedro, I was speaking to a Watford fan earlier, they really like him, a young Brazilian teenager. That team could win the Championship. And then you think, well, hold on, how many of them are going to be there when the transfer window closes? And that's your problem, isn't it? You don't know how to judge. It's really difficult to judge Watford. For that reason, I wouldn't back them, because I'd rather take a shorter price when I know what their team is, in a month's time.
Yeah.
Bournemouth, don't fancy them. I just think it's Eddie Howe leaving them. I just feel like the magic's kind of gone out of Bournemouth a little bit, and it had last season as well, and I don't expect their players necessarily, all of them, to still be there either. And not sure that the backing's quite there as what it was in previous years. In terms of Norwich, it's just whether they can turn that mentality around of losing every week. And you were talking about honesty earlier on. Daniel Farke was very honest in his kind of appraisal of sort of Norwich's season and stuff like that. And that was seen as a very defeatist attitude, wasn't it? And can they turn that around? and suddenly start, oh, we're in the Championship now, we can start winning? That would be my question mark.
Doesn't work like that, does it? But how do you see those bottom, the three that got relegated during this season?
It's the most interesting question every summer, isn't it? Because you have the squad churn, and as you've pointed out rightly, there are still 2 teams here who I'm expecting to sell at least 5, in some cases Watford and Bournemouth, even more players before the window even closes. The first month of their season could just be complete chaos. So it feels like Norwich stand out a little bit, just in the sense of looking a bit more organised. They actually haven't sold many of the guys that we expect them to sell, but they've got the replacements in the building already. And that's sort of quite good succession planning, good recruitment. It seems smart, and it kind of goes in keeping with what we expect under Stuart Webber, who's their sporting director, and Daniel Farke. Everything seems pretty well aligned, fairly well planned, but only Newcastle and Burnley, I think in the last 5 years, have been automatically promoted following relegation. They had Sean Dyche and Rafa Benitez in charge. 2 teams have gone up through the playoffs, obviously Fulham this last season, and Hull a few years ago under Steve Bruce as well. And other than that, it's been pretty tough times. So clearly the relegation hangover, which is very hard to put your finger on and hard to measure how much it's affecting teams, has a huge impact. Difficult sitting here to know exactly what's going on inside those clubs as we speak.
I mean, you can tell us exactly what it's like with Stoke, can't you? What happened to them. But how do you see these 3? How do you see them doing in the Championship this season?
I think all of them are I think all of them are gonna struggle, if I'm honest. I think because what tends to happen is the Premier League teams start to pick the carcass of the relegated teams. So we mentioned Watford, you know, your Norwiches, your Pookie, who's in the picture there. A lot of clubs were looking at Pookie earlier on, and you know, didn't really finish the league great, but I think Norwich are going to still have to balance books because, as you quite rightly said, they've got people in the building who they've succession planned for. So a lot of the lads in midfield, I think the right fullback as well is being sought after. Yeah. Aaron's, you know, is being sought after. So, you know, they're going to lose players. Bournemouth, sinking ship for me, absolute sinking ship. A lot of the players, Wilsons and all these top guys who have been coveted for 40 million a few years ago to Chelsea, you know, you probably pick them up for 20, 25 million now. Sinking ship as in like a Huddersfield, or sinking ship as like a Sunderland? It depends. It depends how many people leave the building and what appetite they have to actually invest in the team. I think that's going to be the key for Bournemouth. If they don't fully invest properly and go at it 100%, I fear for them. Not to say that they'll get relegated, but they will have a very, very difficult season. Before we get your tips, just want to get your thoughts on the beaten playoff semi-finalists as well. Cardiff and Swansea, in 2 very different positions at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different style of play, I think it's fair to say. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with having... You know, I love the fact that there are different ways of playing football, and, you know, Swansea will look to keep it on the floor, and they will look to use their contacts in terms of getting in Premier League loans, and that works well for them. And Cardiff play like Cardiff have played for the last few years, and so Neil Harris was a good appointment in that sort of planning that they did, really. I mean, the Millwall team that he had, you know, were pretty robust, I think it's fair to say, and the Cardiff team are as well. I think that there'll be... I see no reason for a major drop-off from them. They look... I don't feel like there's massive hangovers either. They felt like quite... not lucky or fortunate, but it wasn't. It's not a massive disappointment to not get up. It feels like it almost like they're on a journey. Yeah, and there's no way they finished it. And Kiefer Moore coming in as well. I mean, he would be sort of one of my shouts for a golden boot, just because if you're looking at right, how do we play? Well, we want a big centre forward to hold the ball up, and I thought he did really well at Wigan. If you look at the fact that Ryan Giggs now sticks him in that Welsh national team, I think that says a lot about what he thinks of him as well. The ideal player, really, the ideal signing for Cardiff. I would probably just edge towards Swansea being the more progressive and maybe finishing higher, but see no reason for them to not be in sort of top 8, sort of, you know, around that grade. For Swansea, the next month could be crucial. I mean, Steve Cooper's got those contacts, hasn't he? And Premier League managers want their players to go to clubs and get experience playing that type of football. Yeah, absolutely. I was planning on speaking about Swansea in one of my tips a bit later, so I don't want to give too much away until we get through that. But yeah, no, look, I do like them. I mean,
he's the Pied Piper, isn't he, for young Premier League talent at the moment. Frank Lampard showed the way using his contacts and getting Derby into the playoff places with players who we now recognise to be top quality Premier League players that just needed some minutes, just needed a chance. Swansea did the same last year. He won the Under-17 World Cup with England 2017. And I think now at least 5 of those players will have played for him at Swansea as well. He's already locked in 3 for this season, while Gallagher and Brewster haven't come back and probably won't. Guehi, the centre-back, I expect to be one of the best young centre-backs in the division this year. Woodman, who looks a really safe pair of hands, which is actually pretty crucial in the Championship. A lot of teams who seem to get undermined by goalkeeping errors, and it can be very frustrating for fans. Woodman looks a really solid bet. And Gibbs White as well, who comes in from Wolves. So highly rated, clearly, part of that team that won the World Cup. I think Wolves may have just moved a bit too quickly for his own progression, which is not necessarily his fault. As a club, they've gone further than almost anyone else apart from Sheffield United in English football in the last few years. So Gibbs White just needs a home, needs minutes, and for all reports, this is a guy who's going to be good on the ball, good athletically, work hard for the team and provide a real box-to-box presence. So I'm really looking forward to seeing them play, I must say.
OK, tipping time. In the Championship, good luck. Who goes up automatically?
This is a real tough one. But, do you know, I've got a penchant for Derby. I think Derby are going to be there or thereabouts. The Wayne Rooney factor, just finding his feet last season. And I think Philip Cocu and Rooney are going to do something this year. I've just got I can't really say, you know, give you the 10 reasons why, but I've just got that feeling about Derby. Whether they go up automatically or what, I just think they're going to go up. And
do you think they can win it?
I suppose so. If I'm tipping them, I suppose.
Then why not?
I think what we're all going to find.
You're going for Derby for the Championship.
I'm going for Derby and. Jeez. Do
you want to listen to these two first?
The problem is that it's easier to find faults in all of the teams than it is to really.
Do you know what? I'm going to go for Derby. I'm going to go for the 2 Midlands club, Derby and Forest. Right? Because I think Forest have to respond. And I think they're going to respond. So automatically, Derby and Forest.
Derby to win the title?
No.
Forest to win the title?
No, I'm saying it's either
so you're not giving me a title or one of those two?
No. Them 2 are my tips. You've asked me the tips, I'm giving you.
Splinters again.
No splinters. But I'm not convinced by either of these 2 teams who are going to actually win it. I'm not convinced. Because I could probably chuck another 4 or 5 teams in who probably could do it.
Tyrese won't be happy. You're not chucking Stoke in.
Well, I think because of what they've been through in the previous seasons, I think a challenge for the playoff will be good for Stoke.
OK. Top 2 and the title.
Yeah, it's tough to be bullish on this, isn't it? There'll certainly be some tips later on that I'm feeling more confident about. As we sit here, we've talked about Bournemouth and Watford being in a state of chaos, so you can't really sit and say, well, come May, they're going to be lifting the title, even though if they can get some of those big names motivated to want to play in the Championship, then again, it wouldn't be surprised to see them fly clear. And then of the teams that were in the league last season, for a lot of them, it's hard to predict a huge jump up from, let's say, 8th, 9th, 10th to 1st and 2nd. So boringly, I'm going to go with what the market says, with Norwich and with Brentford. Again, you're kind of throwing darts here, but with Norwich, I just think that they seem a little bit more on top of things after relegation than many of the other clubs we've seen over the last few years, almost like they planned for it. I know Stuart Webber has said before, we spoke earlier, Scott, that he looks at things a little bit differently. It's not as cut and dried as being like Premier League success, Championship failure. It's more like, how can we keep growing to establish ourselves in the Premier League, understanding that it's really difficult to stay in that division. So I'm going to pick Norwich. I'm also going to pick Brentford. We know what the problems are. Watkins is gone. I happen to think that Tony's about as good as they could have done to replace him, shopping in English football anyway. Obviously, they're a team that can sign players from all over the world. And I dare say if Ben Rama goes, I just have confidence in this club and the people running it that there will be someone to step up. Whether that's someone like Fosu, who's already there, probably wouldn't expect him to get the same output. But their scouting department is widely respected across the world for being innovative and creative, and they get things done. So I'm going to say that losing Benrahma is not as big a deal as everyone else thinks. And look, the juicy narrative is they choked at the end of last season. The less exciting one is over the course of the season they were excellent. You know, they were clearly at least the third best team in that league, and they're a team that have got better year on year for the last, God knows, 5, 6, 7 seasons. So I'm trusting the process.
Well, we didn't expect Brian Mbeumo to make the impact he made, and so, you know, who knows what can happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
You look as if you're not agreeing.
No, I agree with Brentford. You know, because when who thought that Mopé was going to be a massive success? You know, if you were sitting here a couple of years ago, nobody would say, "Oh, well, I really fancy Mopé to be a massive hit for Brentford." They're just really good at selling players and then finding replacements. They would have known for a long time that Ben Rama probably off and that Watkins would be going, and they'll have a plan in place. I just hope they don't start slowly. If there is this big turnover of players, that can be an issue for them. But I'll go for them, and I think that Forest just a solid shout. They're good defensively. I think there's continuity there. There's quite a lot of teams that feels like there's big change going on in the Championship, whereas not so much at Forest. Same manager, relatively sort of looks solid enough at the back, and they've added a bit of creativity in Freeman and goals in Lyle Taylor. So I think that's a good mix.
So you're 1-2?
Oh, it would be Brentford first and Forest second.
Brentford, Norwich.
Okay. You're just going 2-2, aren't you? Or 1-1.
Listen. I'm not having Brentford. I'm not having them. Not having Brentford. No. It's too easy to say that they're just going to hit the ground running after losing probably 2 of the most important players of the last 2 seasons. Buy players and bring them in, and all of a sudden they just carry on. No, doesn't happen like that.
Top 6? Let's talk top 6 then.
Ooh. Well, now I could mention my son's team,
Now
Stoke.
you can mention Tyrese.
Now I could mention Tyrese and Stoke. I think Stoke are going to be definitely up there challenging for that top 6, and I hope they get it. I think Swansea. Swansea will get there. I think Cardiff will get there as well. And last but not least, I'm going to go for a Blackburn.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm going to go for a Blackburn. I think they're due a decent season, and they're due getting an opportunity to challenge for the Premier League.
He's steadily improving them, isn't he? What about? Well, give us your thought.
I mean,
I'll just throw into the mix the likes of Preston, Millwall.
Yeah.
And can Neil Warnock do it?
Well, I don't think you can't rule him out, can you? I mean, certainly throughout his whole career, but even if you take the last few jobs, it's success after success. So you'd be stupid to rule him out. I do think that Borough's squad, for what the perception is about Warnock and the sort of players he wants to work with, doesn't necessarily align with that. It's certainly nothing like the Cardiff squad that he had. A lot of young players, a lot of guys who aren't proven at this level, and he's the sort of guy that you feel like when he's got a group of players he can trust and who understand what he's going to do for them, then they'll do well. I guess it's the Borough squad that I don't believe in as much as Warnock, but I don't expect them to be down there, that's for sure, like they were last season. I think the most confident one for me is Swansea. Certainly from a punting perspective, I think you can certainly get 5-2, 3-1. They made the playoffs last year. That was their level last year.
But that was a surprise. No one expected him to do it.
It was a surprise, and unlike Forest, who maybe came out strong, and the overperformance potentially that Mark was discussing and then fell away, I felt like Swansea got stronger. Steve Cooper stepped into the big shoes to fill. Graham Potter had been a very popular manager and had brought a lot of development to that club.
Big players had gone.
Cooper's first senior job. It's not just about getting these young lone stars from the Premier League, even though they did help raise the stature and the quality of the squad. It's just a good side. It looked post-lockdown, they really kicked on, didn't they? And they switched systems. Quite a popular sort of 3 at the back style that we see a lot of teams in the EFL go for now. Bit of extra defensive structure, and they got the most out of a lot of their players. So I'm feeling good about Swansea. All they have to do is match what they did last season, reach the playoffs for this to be a winner. So Swans top 6 for me.
That's all they have to do, match what they did last season.
Yeah, I mean, in the Championship, I often think in all the leagues actually that I think that teams that make loads of changes tend to be overrated, and those kind of, if you've done it and got the form in the book, that counts for a lot, I think, which is why I think Brentford would be one of my, there could be wholesale changes there, but I just think if you reach a certain level, I don't think that should just be looked down upon, really. So yeah, I could see Swansea going well. 2, I agree about Blackburn. I mean, they weren't that
a few clubs,
far.
aren't there, who are like, they're not making huge changes this summer.
No.
They were in that 7th to 12th
Bracket.
position
And it was
last
really
season,
tight. It was
and you're just
really-
trying to find the one that's ready.
and-
You can make a case for all of them.
And I
probably.
think with Blackburn, like Bradley Dack was injured for part of that season. Add more goals to that Blackburn team that's already got Berriton and Sam Gallagher in it. They've got really good midfield and attack. Tony Mowbray, I like as a manager as well. I think he brings players on. So I would go for Blackburn to potentially improve, and at a massive price. Barnsley, I think they've got the best coach in the league in Struber. I've no idea why a Watford or somebody like that haven't gone for him.
I agree.
The way that they are coached is just above virtually everybody else in the Championship, and some of their performances once he came in were really of a high standard. They're sort of among the favourites to be relegated. Don't see that at all. They're really smart recruiters. If you're looking for how the hell did they get in the top 6, it could be Barnsley.
Could be. But yeah, for me, even though he joined halfway through the season, he was my manager of the season. Who's in trouble then for relegation?
I think in terms of the favourites, I think that Wickham, I mean, it's a great story that they're even in the Championship, but I mean, I feel like they weren't one of the best teams in League One. They had a certain way of playing that got them good results. We saw in the playoff final against Oxford, like Oxford played all the football in that game, and yeah, they won, but you're going up another level now in the Championship. Like Wayne Rooney's playing for a team that's mid-table, you know, like that's the kind of level now that they're moving up to. So I think it'll be difficult, although I wouldn't be backing them at the price. I mean, Sheffield Wednesday have got, with the point deduction, I think that might be a handicap too far for them, and at a bigger price has to be QPR.
Really?
Well, it's just, I mean, Eze was a very important player for them.
Yeah.
If you reinvest that money, then you can actually become a stronger team and a stronger squad. But I just not got the faith that they maybe will spend all of that money. And when you lose your best player and you've struggled anyway, how do you suddenly become a better team?
They really struggled post-lockdown. What do you think about the relegation, and can Sheffield Wednesday get out of it -12?
Yeah, so actually Sheffield Wednesday are my pick here, just because I think even though it gives you an easy motivational tool, you know, we're starting -12. That's quite good, I suppose, for motivation for the manager. It's a pretty easy one for Gary Monk, but that's a huge points deduction to have. I've looked back at previous seasons in the Championship. Generally, on average, let's say you'd want to be, or you'd need to be rather, about the 12th or 13th best team, a mid-table team, just to stay up with a -12. So 60 points probably a good aim for them to try and get to, and they didn't make that last season. They were a bottom half team last year, not quite mid-table team. They had some really, really grim spells last year, and some good ones as well. So it's hard to know exactly what was the true Sheffield Wednesday, but they're also going through difficult times off the field where they've been under soft embargo last summer. This summer, again, you're looking at free transfers and loans to replace a lot of, you know, fairly well-established players who have left the club. I do think they needed a refresh, but I just think it's really tough conditions for them to do that, while also having to get results here and now in order just to stay in the division. So I'm going Sheffield Wednesday.
Any team that you know, an outsider, a good bet for you?
Yeah, I actually think QPR is quite a good shout. Eze leaving's the headline, but actually under the radar, I think they conceded like over 75 goals last season, which was terrible. And I like Mark Warburton's style of play. I like the way that he conducts himself. I'm not convinced he's ever had a team with a really solid defence, and that can undermine a team a lot if you're conceding at least one, sometimes 2 or 3 each game. If you've got Eze to help bail you out, it makes a difference, and maybe they'll be struggling. I'm going to go for Huddersfield just as a long shot. I think you can get about 9-1 at the moment. Few reasons really. It's been 3 years of mostly losing for them. 2 in the Premier League, of course, where they were punching above their weight anyway. But even last season, clearly, terrible start. The Cowleys did enough to keep them up, but it's not like they were racking up the wins, is it? Cowleys are gone. New manager, Corberan, who's not managed at senior level in England before, comes highly rated from Bielsa's Leeds setup, of course, but it's obviously not going to be easy. And also, they just have a really tough start. Fixture list to begin with is horrible, and you just worry if they don't pick up points early on. Corberan's going to be under pressure early. That's the last thing he needs. The chairman himself is under pressure for making what was quite a bold call to sack the Cowleys.
I remember reading the Cowley. Danny did an interview. I think it was with the Times at the end of just after he'd been sacked, and you know, he, without putting the boot in too much, he did put the boot into what he felt was really poor ownership at the club, and and direction. Now you might think, well, he's just been sacked. Of course, he feels like that, but actually, he didn't seem that bitter. He trusts himself to get at least as good a job next time. But I just remember reading that, and they're quite honest, the Cowleys. Whenever I sort of trust what they say, and if Danny feels like there's issues there, then
interference, isn't there?
Yeah,
interference from above.
Yeah, he's just very keen to be involved. I think the chair, from what I've heard. But also, like, just lastly, and I don't mean to disparage individual players or anything, but take a look at the Huddersfield squad, and you feel surprised that they were in the Premier League 14 months ago, because even at Championship level, there's not a ton. There's not a ton that leaps out.
Yeah. They got promoted with a negative goal difference, which I think it's the first time it's ever been done. So I mean, it was a bit.
Didn't win a game in the playoffs.
No. So it was great while it lasted.
Should we stop battering them? Just quickly, Kev, your team that you think will go down outside bet?
Yeah,
Anything else as well?
Yeah, I think Sheffield Wednesday. I think it's not even worth commenting on. Again, love the story. Wickham. I think Gareth Ainsworth's done a great job, but I think they're going to struggle. They're really going to struggle. I look at QPR again, and I think to myself, he was the real catalyst for them. He really was. Really good player. Really enjoyed watching him play and do his thing. And I just don't see them having somebody else in there who can move or shake.
Do you think teams can become better as a unit?
Well, maybe.
Even when
maybe that's the case. But you still have to be able to have somebody who can create. Yeah. And that's what he was for them. Not only could he score, he could create. And unless you replace that, maybe with wide players or whatever, then, but we'll see. I think Nathan Jones, you asked me earlier on, Nathan Jones done a good job going back to Luton and, dredging up how he dredged them back, because he knows all the players, I suppose, dragged them up by the bootstraps and just survived on the last day of the season, etc. Can he keep doing it? I'm not so sure if he can.
There's some Coventry and Rotherham fans here who haven't heard the name of their club yet.
I know.
Be thrilled.
Well, definitely.
Not yet, but, there's always a couple of the clubs who come up who one tends to do well and one tends to struggle a little bit. Wickham, we know. I think Coventry are going to be all right. Yeah. I do. I think Rotherham, I'd love to see Rotherham do well. I really would, and stay mid-table. But I think they're going to be in and around that relegation battle. But I'm tipping them to stay up. I think QPR are going to struggle.
Okay. Any other bets at all in the Championship?
No, go on.
I just love first goal scorer markets, all sorts of each way tricksies and trebles, which normally don't provide much, but it's always good fun, isn't it? I think Nahki Wells, he's always been a good goal scorer at this level, but from what I saw last season, even though he didn't get a lot of chance in the Premier League, he just seems to have become a better goal scorer. His movement is brilliant. He's got that low centre of gravity. He can shoot with both feet. Powerful shot as well, and he did it with QPR. He had a great relationship with Eze because his movement in the final third is so good, so with creative players behind him, he's always going to get chances. And I think Bristol City are a team, it's very hard to know what to predict for them. I think everyone kind of thinks mid-table and we'll see what happens, but I do think that the team will be geared towards getting Nahki Wells good chances, and I believe in him as a finisher. So I think you can get about 22 to 1 at the moment, which I think is a very, very fair price.
I mean, I said Kiefer Moore earlier on in the show, and I think he is somebody that has gone to the right club. Sometimes you get forwards or any players, and you think, why have you gone there? Like, they don't play to your strengths, whereas...
It fits, doesn't it? It seems to fit
it
anyway.
Feels like a good fit, and I think that he's somebody that actually... He's had these struggles at certain clubs, but also he scored a lot of goals with Rotherham, wasn't it, previously as well. The other one, a bit of a flyer, not in terms of the betting, because he's highly rated, but, he speaks to anyone at Tottenham, and like Troy Parrott, the people are in Ireland, they are obsessed with Troy Parrott and how good he's going to become. Like Millwall just felt like they needed a bit of a goal scorer last year, and that was maybe what stopped them. So, I mean, if he's as good as what people in Ireland think that Troy Parrott is, then he could have a really big season. It's a step up into men's football really for the first time for him. But like I say, I do a fair bit of work in Ireland, and they're convinced he's the new Messi or something like that. It's like he's past Keane already. Like they love him.
Quinn rolling
they love him.
No pressure there then. Look, chaps, we could talk for hours about the Championship, couldn't we? But thank you very much indeed. Remember, if you are planning on having a bet, please bet responsibly. Next up, we shall be talking League One.